Good afternoon, everyone. And a good afternoon it is. Thursday, the 25th of October. We're going to write this down as one of the nicest New England days that you're ever going to get. It's beautiful out there, topping 70 degrees right now, and it is absolutely gorgeous out there. So we were going to go outdoors and film today, but we got a little scared and we took it inside. It's kind of like when they let class out for the day. We were going to think about that, but not today. Not today. We got a lot to cover, Pete. The NBA has kicked off the 23-24 season. A whole lot of shaking going on there. Not a whole lot going on the college end right now, although I would anticipate next week we will have some signings, possibly in the early November period. I think we'll have some signings there. That'll be exciting in the college world. There's some commitments floating around right now, but obviously the big one is Cooper Flagg down to UConn, and Duke had a visit to Duke. Walking into that arena, walking into that whole excitement down there is something special. Think UConn has a fighting chance there for some reason. I'm a body language guy a little bit. I think UConn has a fighting chance there. We'll see. I'm pretty sure that'll be a decision made pretty early. Before we jump into the full slate of what we have going on today, we start with Feed 'em Fish. Giannis Antetokounmpo, following along in the Jaylen Brown model, has renegotiated his contract, re-signed his contract, and I just wanted to throw some of those details out there. A couple of things I thought were interesting and a little bit funny in some of that conversation was the contract was for a short term, I thought. It was for 3 years. It was $186 million, which puts him in at about $60 million a year. Jaylen Brown, probably in for about 50. So you're seeing where this salary stuff is heading and where it's going, and it's astronomical right now. And it seems to not have, I don't know where the limit is to some of the contracts, but also the exponential growth of them has been absolutely staggering. The exponential growth of the NBA, NFL, any of the contracts right now is absolutely staggering. We thought it was $10 million was a lot for a year. Now we're into the $50, $60 million range per year. And I think that's a little bit for people, that's a lot for people to digest. The funny piece about this was he said he didn't know the exact terms of the contract when he signed it.
What?
Not 100% sure that I can jump on board with that one.
Nobody
But
briefed
his
him
quote
on
was,
it?
He did not know the exact numbers. And some of this is embarrassing a little bit to some of these guys who have some sense of humility left that they're being paid $60 million for that. But, hey, that's the rate. He's the great. He's the one right now. And so that's the new number. $60 million is the new number. And the NBA teams are going to have to deal with that. What you're going to see also is Milwaukee is not a significant market arena. They're trying to stay relevant, keeping him in Milwaukee at least for 3 years. But his environment is certainly better served if they get him into one of those major market arenas where he's in Chicago, LA, New York, one of those places. That's the NBA move. We'll see if that happens with him. 3-year contract. Doesn't really lock them in that much. So I just wanted to go through a couple of other things that occurred related to opening night. I think Celtics fans have a lot of reason to be excited about Kristaps Porzingis. He had a really, really record-breaking opening night, but a really, really solid game. He opened up with 30 points against my New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden. Now, truth be told, we have to give the full context here. The full context of it is he started with the Knicks. He was drafted with the Knicks. The Knicks traded him. He went somewhere else, and now the Celtics were able to include him in part of their off-season rebuild of their roster. And so he had a really, really, really solid game. He wound up with 8 rebounds. He also had 4 block shots. He's enormous. And his ability,
As I recall, he was on your wait-and-see list.
He was on the wait-and-see list, and right now it's a C. It's a C, and I don't mean grade C. He really came out. That's a record, I think, for new players coming into uniform in Boston Celtics. Something about that was mentioned on ESPN, but wow, what a great start. I was a little surprised that they struggled with the Knicks as much as they did, despite the fact the game was in Madison Square Garden, opening game. I thought that was exciting for the NBA. But I think the Celtics are much better than the Knicks right now, and that game was a little closer than I thought it would be. I thought that the Knicks roster is not very strong, if you ask me. I'm a New York Knicks fan going way, way back, but it's not very strong. It's not very strong at all. So the NBA came out with a little bit of a capsule where their first night they came out with 2 games and then ran a really, really large slate of games from there on out. And so the one piece of it is that the way they scheduled everything was that it kept Wembanyama, Victor Wembanyama, the much heralded rookie, kept him off that opening slate of games where they matched up with some really, really NBA royalty right now. The Suns, the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Warriors went into it with a little bit of a 2-team combine there to open the season on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, you came with a full slate. We're going to talk about all of that. But in that, Wembanyama came out on Wednesday. They played against the Mavericks, and there's a little bit of a dovetail for you and me, Pete, because we've talked about this on the show some. They played the Mavericks, and the game was very close, but he wasn't a factor in the game whatsoever. I had a good chance to watch good parts of the game. He was in foul trouble most of the night. He accumulated 5 fouls, didn't have a really good stat line in the game, didn't really impact the game in a significant way. Some of the other Spurs played very, very well, but down the stretch there, they absolutely discombobulated. But to dovetail onto that was the Mavericks were playing. One of the questions you and I had about some of the off-season or late-season moves that the Mavericks did last year was Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic a good fit? Was that going to work? And then we picked up some comments from Luka Doncic, who had a triple-double last night and is absolutely one of the best players in the NBA right now. He is playing at an elite level. But his comments were, we're working on our chemistry. And I thought that was interesting because it gave an honest evaluation of chemistry. It just doesn't occur. We're working on it. And sometimes chemistry can be a different formula. There's a lot of elements in that chemistry. It can be a different formula. And so to say you're working on it is very intelligent, very, very well thought out comment, but it also does allude to the fact that it didn't just happen. And it doesn't always happen in basketball. Chemistry is talked about a lot, and it takes really good coaches to build and to achieve that, because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of elements in that formula. But last night at the end of that game, Kyrie Irving, to me, didn't have a very good game. He was 10 for 24. He had some different looks and different things out there. I think he dominates the ball a little bit too much for a point guard, especially with a great player like Doncic on his team. But at the end of the game, the ball swung, and Doncic had it. And I thought maybe could have pulled the trigger, but he moved it one more time into the corner to a wide-open Kyrie Irving. And Kyrie Irving delivered an absolute knockdown 3 in that situation. And that's what they're talking about as far as that chemistry. He was probably 10 for 23 at that point. And probably not, I didn't think he was shooting the ball extremely well. There at the end of that game, it was a very close game. That's how you build trust. That's how you build trust between players. Doncic moving the ball, coming back, and then right after that, the Spurs came down, discombobulated. They're a young team. That's going to happen. They were a little discombobulated on the offensive end. Then they came down, and Doncic had a chance, stepped back with 2 guys hanging on him, and delivered an absolute knockdown 3 from way, way deep. And it was a really, really big shot, and it sealed the game. Absolutely sealed the game. So you and I were talking about this, and we said it would be something we'd look and follow and see how it's going. After game 1 in the Mavericks organization, I think I'd be a little bit happy to see how those 2 guys are at least working at it.
They're civil about it, right?
Well, they're working at it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a positive. You know, we want this to get better. You know, those are the vibrations of positive people. And then you have the vibrations of negative people where it's not going to work. This isn't happening. You never should have brought this guy here. You know, I give Doncic a lot of credit for this. I give Doncic a lot of credit, and I think Kyrie has an opportunity here to recalibrate his career, restabilize his career, and end it as the great player that he's been, you know, all the way through. You're seeing some guys that are hanging on here as well. You know, I will talk about that maybe a little bit later. Some of the guard play that's gone on, but we'll talk about that just in a bit. But I also wanted to talk about. We'll go into this in the beginning, but their chemistry was good. But a triple double for Doncic, a triple double for the Joker on the first night out in NBA, and so that's pretty cool. To jump into college basketball just for a second, and then we're going to finish with the whole slate of the NBA, what happened, and we'll go down all the games, what was good, who's looking like they're having a good start to the season. And again, it's one game, it's really early, but it's exciting, and we'll go through it. In the college ranks, the ACC coaches are talking that they're a little bit concerned about further alignment, about further growth, if it is growth. I think what you need to look at from the ACC perspective right now is, do they start dumping teams? Do they start knocking teams out from the bottom if they want to create more room in order to create this huge super conference with tentacles that go across the United States? If they're attempting to do that and they want to continue that work, I don't know, if some of those other teams that have been in there for a really, really long time and have built the histrionics and the tradition of the league, I don't know that some of those teams are safe. I don't know that some of those teams are safe. If Syracuse wasn't trying to do their football program as much as they are right now, I could see them return to the Big East. I could see them come back to the Big East.
Wow.
It would make a lot of sense, but football won't allow it. The same thing with Boston College. Boston College didn't move to the ACC for any other sport than their football program, and it's been a disaster. But their football program can't exist as an independent, and you don't have big-time football in the Big East. And so there were decisions to be made, and those decisions were based on dollars and survival as a program. But it obviously also turned you into a catfish. And what I mean by catfish is now you're swimming in Northwestern territory.
Yeah.
You're swimming at the bottom of your conference, just eating up all that profit-sharing stuff. It's really cool, but hey, it doesn't always look good. John Shire picks up a 6-year deal. I thought that this was very interesting. He's coached for 1 year at Duke, and now they've offered him a 6-year extension to his originally existing contract. So I think that's pretty. It's an endorsement of Coach Shire for sure, but a little interesting on the Duke front that they would do that this early at this time, that they would have the feeling that after 1 year, and it wasn't a great year. It's not like they won the national title, went to the Final Four. It wasn't one of those years, where you said it was an unbelievably great year. Actually, they had some growing pains. But, a new 6-year contract to extend what he had already. I don't know how much further that takes it out. I mean, obviously, he probably had a 4 or 5 year contract to begin with. This might extend it out. Now it's out, it's out 6 years, but that kind of dovetails back into the point you and I spoke about last week, where these coaches are always looking for extensions, and these schools get extended way, way, way beyond. I think Duke's fairly committed to John Shire.
Yeah,
so I don't think that length of time is there. But when we talk about some of the other contracts that some of these people have, it's absolutely precluded the school from firing them. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pete. Go ahead.
Seems like they found that like they think it's a good fit and they want to lock them in as long as they can, right?
In this case, I think they do.
Yeah.
In this case, they think they do. In the other cases, I think that some of these guys have really good agents, and their agents are good at manipulating and creating narratives and crafting narratives that make it look like the school needs to do this.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, that's the money that the school has on the table in their programs, and that's where at one time UMass probably had 2 or 3 basketball coaches on their payroll at the same time. They probably had 2 or 3 basketball coaches on their payroll at the same time, in addition to football, hockey, and other coaches who are out on the payroll. Means they weren't even coaching for your team, and yet they're still being paid by the university. So that's a little bit of excitement for Durham. Let's see if it pumps through with the Cooper signing, and if that does, well, then it might be worth it. Boogie down in Lexington. All right, much talked about New York City point guard Boogie Fland has decided to go to Kentucky, sign with John Calipari, and this is big for Kentucky's program. Indiana was in the mix there. I thought St. John's would be able to get in there a little bit because he's a New York player, and Rick Pitino being home, I thought they might be able to get in there. The young man was committed to getting out of Dodge, and signing with one of the blue blood programs in the country. He's decided to go with John Calipari. And if you look at John Calipari's NBA stack, if you will, the players that are in the NBA that are playing right now that played at Kentucky, A, you might ask yourself, how come they don't have more national titles than they do? And B, you might also want to ask yourself, how are they getting it done like that? And these players are doing as well as they are in the NBA, because they're absolutely dominating NBA rosters right now. There's not another college that's out there. Maybe Duke a little bit is. If you can get Zion together, that might help Duke's cause. But right now, Kentucky's dominating.
Ready for your answers?
Yeah.
A, chemistry. B, NBA factory.
No doubt. No doubt. And players respond to that in the recruiting trail. Not only now are you being paid, but they're on their official visit, maybe De'Aaron Fox stops by, on their official visit, maybe Jamal Murray stops by, from all of these different pro teams. So, and I'm sure there's some representation of them somewhere in the rafters, or
hallway
in the hallway
or
some way that they have. It was in the high schools in New York City that they were doing that a long time ago. When their players would sign with a college, they would get a jersey from that college and hang it in the hallway. So when a prospective student started walking down the hallway, the first thing they started to see was all of the jerseys of all of the people. And what it is it's proof in the pudding, really.
Yeah.
You're saying, if you want to be an NBA player, you come to Kentucky, because look at the number of players we've sent. So Boogie Down Fland in Lexington, I know he was in with Indiana. And maybe, I don't think this had anything to do with it, but the gentleman we talked about who reneged his commitment to Duke last year, Mackenzie Mabako, he was in when Kyle Filipowski decided to return to Duke. He decommitted from Duke, opened up his recruitment, wound up signing with Indiana. Unfortunately, got arrested in a Taco Bell parking lot the other night. Not 100% sure about all the details of that, but a little unfortunate when you get in there. You're a superstar. And maybe they closed the drive-through window in your face. I don't know. At Taco Bell, that's tough to deal with, I know. But you drive on. You drive on. Maybe there's a Chick-fil-A open. Maybe there's a Kentucky Fried Chicken open. I don't know. But you drive on. Okay, in the NBA, a little bit of an interesting stat. We talked about this also. They have a record 125 international players in the NBA right now. 125. So if you think there's about 30 teams in the NBA, probably a pretty accurate number. I don't know the exact number. I'm sure we'll figure it out soon.
10 players per team.
You're
12.
talking about it's about 4.
Well, I mean total players.
There's 125 total, so if you split that up between 30 teams, it's about somewhere between 4 and 5 players per team.
Yep.
And the reason I bring up that math is because in all of the leagues in Europe, they have restrictions on how many Americans can join their team. So I'm interested to see if the NBA will now reach out, since their numbers are now flooding in at the rate that they are. I'm interested to see if the NBA will now enact a policy to protect the American player and limit the amount of international players on each team. Moby Dick and Rin Tin Tin, we talked about, was Puppy and a Guppy. That's the last time any significant change like that happened. So we'll wait. We'll wait, Pete. All right, first night out in the NBA. We're going to jump right in. We had the Lakers and the Nuggets. It was a good game. I got to watch both games. Very good game. The Nuggets are very solid. They got their rings. They hung their banner up in there, so it's always a beautiful night. I'm going to give the Lakers, I've given them this piece of advice before. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to send it out all the way to Los Angeles. Here's your piece of advice, folks. 1, 2, 3. LeBron James is a point guard. You have to put him on the point. If you want to win, if you want to have any chance to win the Western Conference, you right now, tomorrow, move LeBron James to the point. I can't believe Kenny Smith, Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, all of those guys that sit up in the booth all night cannot see that when he has the ball in his hands, that team is an entirely different dynamic. I can't see that the Laker management, the organization, Darvin Ham, whoever the 15 assistant coaches they have around him, I cannot believe it for the life of me that they do not see that this is one of the greatest players in the game. He needs to have the ball in his hands. He needs to be the one making those decisions. And that's when the Lakers will turn this whole thing around. I'm going to go also out and say, I have had enough of Anthony Davis. We're not going to mention him anymore on this show as one of the top players, except later on when we talk about the top 10 that they threw out, which there's no way that he belongs in the top 10 of NBA players right now. I watched him the other night. He got annihilated by Jokic. Another triple-double. And to be honest with you, he just doesn't seem interested to that level and where he's competing at that really, really high level. I just don't see it. I don't know. But anyway, Jokic, triple-double, opened up the season. The Nuggets look very, very good. We're down on Davis. Again, move LeBron James to the point, and you'll have a chance. Keep doing what you're doing right now, and you'll be about the third best team in California this year. Suns, Warriors. Ooh, that was a good game. The Suns looked very, very good. I brought in the ginger ale today, Pete, because I think we're going to get a couple of allergies acting up here because it's so hot and so beautiful and warm today.
Yep, I hear that.
We got the Suns and we got the Warriors. Unbelievable. It was a game of runs. Absolute game of runs. The Warriors opened up. I think they have some issues there, and I'm going to say it just like I said it in the LeBron thing. All right? We have to move Steph Curry, one of the great players in the game. He has to have the ball in his hands all the time. I know you brought in CP3, Chris Paul. You had the chant. Everybody feeling good about themselves. It's not going to work. You got to move Steph Curry to the point. You got to have him with the ball in his hands at all times. If he wants to shoot it, he shoots it when he has it, not waiting for somebody else to give it to him. It's throwing off his rhythm. It's throwing off his vibration. Take it from me. I've watched a lot of basketball in my life. If you want, try it. Move LeBron in there for 10 games and see what happens to your team. But I thought the Suns were very impressive, and they did not have Bradley Beal yet. One of the things I thought was very impressive is because CP3 was with them and then moved. Now they're looking at a point guard situation. They had Devin Booker playing the point for a little while the other night, and he looked really good doing it. So if they can have Devin Booker succeed as a point guard over there, and in the NBA, nobody presses, so what's the big deal anyway? And then bring Bradley Beal in, I think you're going to have a really good situation there in Phoenix. I think they're going to compete with the Nuggets to be one of the top teams there. All right? But that was their first night, the NBA. Actually a pretty good move. And then the flood came. Every game after that was the very, very next night, and it was boom, 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 boom. A lot of good games, a lot of bad games. A lot of games when the NBA was trying to make this work, they put together, obviously, that first night and said, okay, this is going to be really good. And then you have Wembayani, you match him up with Doncic, and you have some of this and you have some of that. But then you get to the bottom of the NBA, and now you're just slinging hash. Now you're just moving it around and saying, oh, this game's going to stink. There's not a lot of good strength down at the bottom of the NBA. The NBA is bifurcated right now, and it's going to get worse because the teams that are good are really getting better, and the teams that are bad, holy smokes, I looked at some of those rosters, and I looked at some of those box scores. Going to be a long night in some of those states. Going to be a long night. I'll give you a couple of them. I think the New York Knicks are going to struggle. I think the Nets are going to struggle. I looked at their roster. I don't see how they win a lot of games. Mikal Bridges isn't going to carry you all the way to the promised land. I can promise you that. And so then you look at some of these other teams. Utah Jazz, oof, their roster's terrible. A couple of other ones really, really bad. Like there's 3 guys on the Phoenix Suns that would start on any of those teams and be the best player. Easily.
Wow.
Easily. Okay, so we go right off the get. This was kind of an upset. The Hornets beat the Hawks, and that was surprising to me. P.J. Washington went for 25 points on them. I looked at the Hawks roster, though, and it wasn't that surprising. It's not that good. It's the same roster that's been there for a really long time that's just been okay. It hasn't done anything to improve it, hasn't done anything to really, really make that step to take it to that next echelon where I think maybe OKC and the Sacramento Kings, teams that are trying to build and go. I think they've done a good job. I think you're going to see Atlanta Hawks struggle a little bit this year, just based on that. I did think we watched Brandon Miller. He didn't start, the number 2 pick in the draft, and he didn't start the game for them. Came off the bench, and he was okay. He had 13 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, not bad. Then we went to the Wizards and the Pacers. Whoa, 263 points, 143 to 120. 263 points. So, to Will Dawkins out in Washington, hire yourself a defensive coordinator, slow the ball down, or these big margins of defeat are going to be real every single night. This could be the worst team in the NBA right now, and they're going to struggle. And taking it from the Pacers like that, 143 points from the Pacers, my God, what's going to happen when you play the Suns? All right, so Tyrese Halliburton had an unbelievable game for the Pacers in that, 20 and 11. If he starts dropping 11 assists, that team could be pretty good. I think he's going to be okay. Bruce Brown was a piece that everybody said, what did the Nuggets lose in order to kind of weaken them a little bit? They lost Bruce Brown, the Miami product, and Bruce Brown's a really, really solid basketball player. He's now, got a new spot, and he's got 24 points, 3 rebounds. Good job for him last night. So the Nuggets will miss him, I think. The Nuggets are loaded anyway, but he was a really good cog in that wheel that they had going there. Celtics and the Knicks. I thought the Celtics would wipe the Knicks out. I think the coach does a good job. Thibodeau does a good job, but I don't think the Knicks are that good. The real interesting point for me was to see Jrue Holiday matched up against Brunson, because the last time they kind of matched up when Holiday was in Milwaukee, Brunson gave it to him and gave it to him good. And last night, Holiday did a good job. Stayed in front, forced him into some bad shots. Again, 10 for 24, I think he was. Wasn't a good night for him, for Brunson. Randall didn't have a great night. That's, the Knicks just aren't that good, in my opinion. The Celtics came out. I think they're going to have, we keep saying chemistry.
Yep.
We keep saying chemistry. That'll take a little, Porzingis jumping in with 30 being the leading scorer. Well, where was Brown? Where was Tatum? How did they get intermixed into the whole thing? And I think that's why the game was as close as it was. When that team hits its stride somewhere, when they've played 20 games together and that team starts to hit its stride, I think the Celtics are going to be, I have them down as Eastern Conference champions right now. I think the Miami Heat are going to draw a different eye this year from teams. They had success last year. Nobody really thought they were very good. They rode Jimmy Butler and Adebayo all the way down to the line. But at the end of the day, I think they're going to get a different look this year. I think teams are going to play them differently. Okay, then you had the Rockets and the Magic, another blowout. Rockets are bad. Rockets are really bad, terrible roster. Ralph Sampson and Hakeem Olajuwon, Kenny Smith, and Charles Barkley, and Clyde Drexler, they're all rolling around right now looking at that team. It's terrible. Also, Thompson came off the bench. He was 1 for 7 from three-point range. Didn't really get going. His stat line was decent, 8 and 5, a couple of blocks, but it really didn't go. The Magic have a nice balanced team. The Magic have a very balanced team. Banchero didn't play great, but they still managed to win big. Cavs and the Nets was a very, very good game. Donovan Mitchell is a guy, there's what I'm going to go through this, and we're going to point to obscurity men. Guys who operate in obscurity, but they're great players, and they don't have that NBA name and franchise. But to consider that you would put Anthony Davis in the top 10 NBA picks, and you wouldn't have Donovan, the young man from the Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell, in your top 10. That's crazy. He's emerged as one of the big-time players in the NBA. He was with Utah for many, many years. Had a monster game against the Knicks in New York. He's from New York, so, from the Nets, because he's from New York, so he probably liked being in Brooklyn. But it's a really close game. Came down to the end of it, and the Cavs wound pulling it out. Again, Ben Simmons starting for the Nets. I'm very happy to see that. Markelle Fultz starting for his team. I was happy to see that because they've both struggled with some different issues, and I'm happy to see them back in uniform. But the Nets roster is not very good. The Nets starting 5 wasn't very good. Pistons and the Heat was a good game. The Pistons played very, very well. The Heat scored. Their usual low. They're in 103, 102. It's Eric Spoelstra going up and down the line. Jockeying it, calling plays, getting the ball to the right people, doing all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, their roster is just not that good. It's just not that good. Cade Cunningham had a good game, 30-9, and he had a solid game. And he could be a great player in the NBA. Here's something that was exciting, I think, for the Detroit fans. Jalen Duren had 17 and 14. He's a young player out of Memphis, had a great reputation in high school, went to college, kind of floated around for a year, didn't have a great year while he was at Memphis, but now really he's big. 6'11", 7 foot, and he's got good hands, good skill set. 17 and 14. If they can keep getting that from Jalen Duren every night, they're going to be a better team than people thought.
Right.
Timberwolves and the Raptors. That was a pretty good game. Pretty good game. Anthony Edwards had a monster game, came out right off the get-go. The Raptors have a lot of balance. They have a lot of depth. They have some really good, solid players. Scotty Barnes had a good night. Anunoby had a good night. They have some good pieces there. Again, people that kind of operate in obscurity, But Anthony Edwards went for 26 and 14. He had 5 offensive rebounds. He had 26 points and 14 rebounds. For a forward, that's a great night. Really, really rebounding the ball well. And if you get 5 offensive rebounds, that creates, really, really, between 10 and 15 points for your team. Just from that opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a really good, offensive rebounding is tough because it really demoralizes your opponent as well. Thunder and the Bulls, 124-104. People are sleeping on the Thunder this year. I keep telling people the Thunder are for real. Now with Holmgren added into the lineup, I don't think he's going to be anything superstar, but I think he's going to be an okay piece for them. But, they're just operating, at a different level right now than some of these other young teams, And obscurity, man, again, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. How do you average 30 points in the NBA, Pete, and operate in obscurity? Now, people are starting to find out about him. He was in the top 10 with the ESPN top 10 players. I was glad to see him in there. But this young man averaged 30 points a game last year, and he's off to another amazing start. He has that team in the right spot, and they went into Chicago, who's not a bad team, and they wiped Chicago up on their home floor. Holmgren was 11, 4, and 3. He started, which is a positive for them. He played 25 minutes, which is a positive. But the whole deal out there is he's going to fit well because they have SGA, Shai Gilgeous. All right, the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. This is where the NBA started slinging slash and said, okay, we got some hash, we got some slash, and let's dash. But what I was excited to see there was what happened with Zion Williamson. And to see where he's at. Injuries have been plaguing him his entire career. Obviously, his build and his frame creates such a pounding on the rest of his extremities. But 23-7 and 3 last night. If he can get going, they can have a good year. If he can get going. A little bit of a surprise there for the Grizzlies. But they have Desmond Bane, another obscurity man. He had a monster game, 31, 5, and 5. He's really out of TCU, showed up out of nowhere, really, and just really, really might have played in Europe for a year, but he was really exploding on the NBA scene right now and really doing some good stuff. Okay, so then you come to the Kings and Jazz. The Kings are an emerging team. Let's say it again. The Kings are an emerging team in the NBA. OKC Thunder are emerging. If they're a stock, you're buying them. The Kings, if they're a stock, you're buying them. They've got some good talent. They got some good pieces. Last night, they got a game out of Harrison Barnes, who I had a double take when I had to look at it to make sure he was still in the league. But he went up for 33 points. And I got to tell the Jazz, if you're interested, I know some people that are defensive coordinators, and if you're going to let Harrison Barnes go for 33 on you, it's going to be a long year. It's going to be a long year up in Utah. Okay, I'm going to tell you that right now. It's going to be a long year in Utah. I hope it doesn't snow too much because that's going to bring everybody down. It's not all that jazzy in Utah. Mavs and the Spurs. This was a very good game. We'll talk about it because we talked about it a little bit. We'll just briefly brush on it. Doncic played great. Wembanyama came out, struggled a little bit. That's why they have Greg Popovich, the senior coach there, try and guide him through his post-game comments where he thought he stayed mentally strong, did a good job. My thing was he was never in the flow of the game, never really got into rhythm. Played the last couple of minutes, and when they brought him back into the game, the Spurs were playing much better without him. And when they brought him back into the game, that game was lost in the last 2 minutes of the game. And when they lost it, it was because they came down and they didn't really look like they had an idea about what they wanted to do. Prior to him being in the game, I think they had an idea about what they wanted to do. But it'll be interesting to watch. Kyrie was 10 for 24. He was 1 for 8. But the dagger that he put in their heart at the end of that game was huge. It was huge. So you can be 10 for 23 as long as you make those end-of-game crunchers. Blazers and the Clippers. Portland, it's going to be long year. Blazers are not going to blaze anything this year. All the trading, all they did. DeAndre Ayton came out. I think he had scored 2 or 4 points. I'm high on this guy, and I was always high on Anthony Davis. These are 2 big guys, 6'10", 6'11", with all the talent in the world, who just seem to run up and down the court and not involve themselves. That's, I guess, why they traded him from Phoenix like they did. I was a little surprised that they traded him. Scoot Henderson, we're keeping an eye on our young guys that got drafted. Scoot didn't really scoot in his opening debut. Was looking for a little bit more, but there's not a lot there to support this. There's not a lot there to support this. And when you look at their roster, you'd say, wow, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult there. All right, so that kind of closes us out for the games. The top 10 that the ESPN came up with, we want to close out with that a little bit as well. They came up with their top 10. We gave you from 50 on down. We talked about those guys, and we called it the hunt for Jaylen Brown. I believe we had him in the 19 hole. I believe he was 19th, and he probably has the second best contract in the NBA right now. We might want to do some research on that, but he's just, he's something. There's something there the Celtics saw that they wanted to make that franchise work. And when they go with Tatum, you're going to have to realize that you're going to have over $100 million per year tied up in 2 players. Does that impact the rest of your team? When Porzingis wants to now renegotiate and his contract goes into the $40 million range, now you're at $140 million, 3 players. Throw in 1 more guy, and they have him. You're talking about $200 million per year tied up in 4 players. I'd love to know how some of these NBA teams are making money.
Where does it end? This is the thing. Where does the caps? Where do they put the cap on these players' salaries?
Apparently there is none. They have a salary cap in the NBA.
That's a soft cap,
which is it's a cap that can get blown straight off like a volcano, apparently, because you can re-sign your own player for whatever dollar figure you want that goes into it. I'm not talking about salary cap implications here. I'm talking about viability.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm talking about allocution. I'm talking about how do you allocate your money. And so does it help the Celtics, and does it build them into, or is it something that's for the short term that you hope to God it works and produces a championship? But if it doesn't, you may have signed your team up for some mediocrity coming into the years that you're approaching. So it'll be interesting to watch that. Here was the top 10 they had. Again, there's a bunch of guys in here that I would include number 10, and we're going to start from 10. We'll work all the way up to the top. Number 10, they have Anthony Davis. Again, we're down on Davis. We're down on Davis. The only thing that was saved this top 10 is that they didn't have James Harden in it. The only thing. And I got a little piece for you there on Harden. I didn't want to go hard to be Harden today because it's just
too easy,
and it's boring now. It's boring me now. I don't care. He lost me, But we'll give him a quick second there. What happens also is one of the reasons that he went to different functions at different times. People would say, well, Daryl Morey's a liar. I can't work with him. But then all of a sudden he shows up for this or for that. The reason for that is because they would then own the rights to his contract and could move it anywhere they wanted once he violated the terms of it or had some conditions in there that he did not meet. So when you see Harden show up, it ain't because he's trying to be a good guy. It ain't because he's trying to work it out, trying to get going. He's just trying to hold on to his contract. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him one bit. But that's what that is. And we're calling it out in the zone for exactly what it is. It's hard. It's hard to be Harden. But at that dollar figure, it ain't that hard. It ain't that hard. Okay. They have LeBron James listed 9th here. And I get it. Just like every high-value vehicle, there's depreciation. But I have not seen it. And I'm not the biggest LeBron James fan of all times. You know, I've questioned his defensive intensity. I've questioned some things about his game. But when you put it down, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in all-time greatest players. And in the NBA right now, I have him down as the best player. I think he's better than Antetokounmpo.
See, the thing is, when you lose a step, you gain. He's gaining. It's like Tom Brady. You're gaining all that basketball savvy and mental acuity that you don't have when you're younger, and you have that extra step.
It's 100% right, and that's why I think he has to have the ball in his hands.
Yeah, right. I agree with you. Yeah.
Would you put Tom Brady at wide receiver just because he can run a 4-2?
That was what came up in my mind when you were talking about it earlier.
You wouldn't.
Right.
You wouldn't. You want the ball in Steph Curry's hands. You want the ball in LeBron James's hand. They started him out in the league as a point guard, and everybody went, oh, my God. They moved him off the ball, and everybody went, he's great. But he's got to bring the ball down off it. They outlet to him, and they go. And he's unstoppable in the open floor. I have no idea what the Lakers are doing. Well, they got Ham and Cheese coaching. They got Darvin Ham, and then they got some cheese assistants down there, and they're just sycophants who are doing whatever they're told to hang on to that L.A. paycheck. I got it. But somebody put the ball in this guy's hands, and you'll have a chance. I'm tired of watching your team stink. Sorry, got a little hot there.
That's fine.
Number 8, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I was so glad they gave him his prop, gave him a little shot. This young man is one of the rising stars in the NBA and really, really averaged 31 points a game. I know he's in Oklahoma. I know it's hard to find some of the stuff that's going on out in Oklahoma, and they don't get the media market, and they don't get all that major, prime time on TNT and TBS, but take my word for it. This young man belongs right where he is, and you might even bump him up a little higher because he's playing at a significantly higher level than his compadres. Average 30 points a game in the end. Averaging 20 points a game in any institution is unbelievably difficult. To average 30 points per game over the course of an 82-game season is absolutely staggering, and he's tearing it up. I got to give him his props. Number 7, you can drop this guy out too because I'm not a big fan anymore, Kevin Durant. Durant it means over. It's French for it means it's over. Okay, Durant, it's over. Okay, he's going to fit in well with the Phoenix Suns, but to say that he's the top 7, top 6 player in the NBA right now is absolutely ludicrous. To compare him and Donovan Mitchell, come on, people. What are you talking about? I know you want to make the NBA happy and you want to keep it all good with your core of people. You'll do them a favor when you drop Anthony Davis and you drop Durant out of the top 10, and then they either become hungry to recalibrate themselves and rejoin the top 10, or they drop to where they probably will drop for the rest of time. You'll be doing them a huge favor by telling them the truth. You're not top 10 anymore. If you want to be, pick it up. Regain your earlier form, and we'll put you back in the top 10. But right now, in the zone, Kevin Durant's not even in the top 20. Jason Tatum, number 6. I'm getting so fired up, Pete, my headset's waggling on me. I love it. Jason Tatum, number 6. You like him at 6 feet?
Yeah, I think so. But now with the way the dynamics are working on the team, does he reassert himself into that slot?
Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting question.
Right?
A lot of it's personality. A lot of it's personality. And so we'll be interested to say. But I like him for what he's accomplished right now, where he's at. One of the great young players in the game. I like him in the 6th spot right there. I'm high on Jason Tatum. I think when you see a person like Jason Tatum kind of step back and give up a little bit of his sunshine so that the rest of the team can be better, I think that that's a pro.
Right.
I think that that reeks of humility, and I think he's being misunderstood for that right now. People are questioning him. Oh, he didn't step up at big times. If you watched older games, LeBron James and Michael Jordan and plenty of great players have passed the ball off at great times because other players were open, and that's the play to make. And so I think he's drawn a little bit of unfair criticism here, and I want to be in his corner a little bit. I'm very high on Jason Tatum. I think he's a great pro, and I think he's good for Boston too. Number 5, Steph Curry, the absolute greatest shooter of the basketball ever. Watch some of his videos. When he goes into a gym, he makes over 100 threes in a row. It's never been anything like this young man and his ability to shoot the basketball. He can change his arc. He can move it up. He can move it down. Again, Golden State Warriors, get him the ball. CP3, I get it, and it's going to be hard. Bring him off the bench. Let him be the backup point guard. It's going to be hard, but he's in the twilight of his career. And right now you can build that team around some of the other younger players you are. And I'm going to throw in one more piece of advice for the Warriors. Klay Thompson's cooked, okay? Klay Thompson is cooked. He had the best of his career, is in his rearview mirror. He's cooked. Get some other young players out on the floor. Accentuate Wiggins. Accentuate Kuminga. Accentuate some of the good young players that you have there. Luka, I love Luka. I think he's a great shooter. He passes. Triple doubles means he's rebounding. He's doing everything. He came up with 2 really loose ball steals at the end of that game last night, which really sealed the victory for them. I just don't love their roster that much. Never been a huge Kyrie Irving fan because I have him in the ball control model. Never been that huge fan of his. But if they can make it work, I think it'll be okay, but I don't think the rest of the roster is that good. Mark Cuban, get off Shark Tank and go get some guys to put around Luka, because you got a top 5 player in the NBA right now, and you're hanging around him with some players that that probably don't belong in a good CYO game. All right, go spend some of those Shark Tank dollars. Go get them some players and get Dallas back into the finals when you had Dirk and the rest of that crew, and you won it.
Are you saying get rid of the jabronis and bring in some talent?
Bring in some talent around him. Yeah, he's a great player, and right now he's out there toiling in mediocrity. You really want to make something happen. Bring in some of these good young talented players and surround them with Doncic and see what happens. Right now, I don't think they have enough. I understand why they brought in Kyrie, but he's got about 1,000 games under his belt. There's a lot of wear and tear. It's like we said with LeBron. We didn't see it with him. That's the great athlete that he is. We haven't seen the wear and tear on his body. You haven't seen it. Another thing, too, is when was the last time LeBron James fouled out of a game, do you think, Pete?
Oh, God, I don't know. He gets a lot of stuff, so.
2017 was the last time LeBron James fouled out of an NBA game.
Wow.
So either he's not playing a whole lot of defense or the refs like him an awful lot. Joel Embiid in the 3 spot. Again, Philadelphia, get Harden out of there, start to rebuild around Embiid, but another group of people I don't think that has a very good roster. You're very talented at the very top of that roster, but you don't have the depth that the Nuggets have. You don't have the depth that the Suns now have. I don't think you got the depth that OKC has right now or the Orlando Magic has right now. So I think they got a rebuild going on there, and I think that if they're doing a disservice to Joel Embiid, who's a superstar player, and he's surrounded right now by not a good supporting cast at all. The Joker, they had at number 2. I love it. I love him. Nikola Jokic, he does it all. He passes, he shoots, he rebounds. When he gets the ball around the basket, he's tough. He has a meat hook that goes right over the top of his shoulder. That's an 80 to 75% make shot. When he gets into that position, turns his shoulder, he's just absolutely devastating with that shot. I thought he absolutely ate Anthony Davis for lunch in that game the other night. I've seen him do it on other occasions, and it's one of the reasons that the Nuggets are as good as they are, because when you have somebody that big, that talented, who can do just about everything in the game of basketball, You're looking at a guy like Magic Johnson who could shoot. This guy's Magic Johnson with a three-point shot. Giannis Antetokounmpo, number one. Everybody loves him at number one. I'd move him down a little bit because I don't think he has the offensive skill set to be number one. I think Joker's a better player than him. I certainly think Joel Embiid might be a better player than him because they have the offensive skill set. If Antetokounmpo can dunk the ball or can be within 3 to 5 feet of the basket, he's an effective scorer. If he has to be outside of 10 feet of the basket, he's not an effective scorer. His free throw shooting isn't Shaquille O'Neal territory, but it's a problem. His free throw shooting's not where it needs to be for an elite player, especially for a person who gets fouled as many times as he does.
Sure.
You can be a 70%, let's take a 60% free throw shooter. If you shoot 100 shots, you miss 40. If you shoot 1,000, you miss 400. And he's in the range where he's shooting a ton of free throws, more most than almost anybody in the league. And then with that low percentage, you're talking about having a lot of missed opportunities there for that team. And so considering him to be number one, I love him. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great pro. And if they're giving Jaylen Brown $50 million, he's certainly worth 60. No doubt about it. But I think there's other players in the NBA. If I was starting my franchise right now, are you taking Joker or are you taking Giannis Antetokounmpo? I'm taking Joker.
Joker, yeah.
That's the way I'm going because
Yep.
I want a guy who can shoot the ball. And when he gets to the foul line, being 60% and being 80% is the difference between winning and losing. At the end of the game, you will have to make free throws. It's the first sign I ever saw when I started coaching basketball. It was hung in the All Hallows Gales locker room in the South Bronx on 161st Street and River Avenue. And the sign said simply, hung there by John Kerry, the head coach, layups and free throws are the difference between winning and losing. Layups and free throws. It was the first day of my coaching career, and I've never seen anything that resonates or makes more sense than that. Pete, do we have any time left?
Yeah, we got a couple of minutes.
Okay. Just wanted to go back and give a shout out because I'm excited about this. Springfield is going to become Bonner territory. Springfield's going to be lit up with the brown and the white and the faithful. They'll be there. You trust me, they'll be there. When we have a game and it's on the road and it's against a great opponent like Florida Atlantic, trust me, Bonner Nation's going to be there. They're going to be there, and it's going to be a really good doubleheader. I think that you're going to see West Virginia against UMass. West Virginia has an interim coach. Frank Martin has a new revamped roster that's up and down the boulevard. But I think that UMass fans are going to like the transfer they brought in from St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Big 6'10" guy, and he led their conference in scoring, I believe, the NEC, but he was maybe top 25 in the entire country in scoring. He's big, he's wide, and so what happened at UMass a while ago is they went to this perimeter attack like you see at Golden State, except the guys they have shooting the ball aren't Steph Curry. The guys they have shooting the ball are not even in that range, and that's part of the problem. And so when you go to that spread model, you better have those guys that can actually do that. That was UMass's problem. I think Coach Martin has a chance to recalibrate here a little bit and go inside out with a good, solid big man. You know, if you watch that Illinois-Chicago team, they went inside, they went outside, they had a four front out on the perimeter. I thought that's good. But that's, I think, UMass's is their chance, is to create and recalibrate a little bit of an inside-out game. Instead of chuck and duck, let's get into a little bit of this calibration of everybody touches the ball, we all move the ball, and we're running offense in order to ensure that our best players are getting the shots. You can't just go up and down the floor every time and let guys who aren't proficient shooters shoot the basketball. It's going to kill your rhythm. It's going to put inordinate amount of pressure on your defense, and it's going to make your rebounding even more difficult. And so those three factors right there are a good reason not to be like the Golden State Warriors. For the simple fact of the matter is you're not the Golden State Warriors. Okay, I'm very excited about Mark Schmidt and the St. Bonaventure Bonnies this year, though. Think we're going to have a great year. Matchup against Florida Atlantic. Wow, that's a great matchup. Great team. Vlad Golden is going to be on our big list for the NBA draft next year. The big man, we love him. And November 6th, Pete. November 6th, we're going to have games to talk about in the college ranks. So when this thing goes NBA and then goes to NCAA, and we got games and news and all this other stuff, we're going to have to stay focused because we're in the zone, Pete. We're in the zone. See you next week, folks. Have a great day. Have a great week.